Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. The topic of today's webinar is Cimarron District Office supporting firefighters in New Mexico with solar and storage. This webinar is presented by Clean Energy Group as part of the Resilient Power Project. Our host for today's webinar is Seth Mullendore. Seth is the Vice President and a Project Director at Clean Energy Group. We also have some excellent guest speakers with us on the line. Before I pass it over to them, I'd like to just go over some quick housekeeping notes. All of our attendees today are in listen-only mode. You have a couple of options to join the audio portion of the webinar. You can call in via the telephone, or you can connect via your computer's mic and speakers. If you'd like to minimize the webinar console so that you can view the webinar slides full screen, click on the little orange arrow that you see circled here. You can also use that arrow to expand the webinar console. Following our webinar presentation, we are saving about 15 minutes for a Q&A with the audience. We ask that you please submit your questions by typing them into the questions box on your webinar console and hitting send. We will get to as many questions as we can, but have a lot of people registered for this webinar today, which means that we will probably get a lot of questions. To make sure that we get to your question, please type them in when you think of them. Don't wait until the very end. Finally, this webinar is being recorded. We'll post a recording of this webinar on our website, cleanegroup.org/webinars, and we will also send you a follow-up email within about 48 hours with a link to the webinar slides and recording. Now I'd like to pass it over to our host for today's webinar, Seth. He will be introducing our webinar topic and today's speakers. Seth?
Thank you, Mari, and thanks to everybody for joining us today for this webinar about a really exciting project in New Mexico. I'm going to do a quick introduction to who we are here at Clean Energy Group. Clean Energy Group is a national nonprofit based in Vermont. We are honored to have the support of several foundations that are supporting our work as we advance innovation in clean energy technologies through policy, finance, and support for individual projects. We also have a sister organization called Clean Energy States Alliance. This is a membership organization of state agencies that manage clean energy funds. So the Resilient Power Project is work that we've been doing for about 5-6 years now. And the goal of the project is really to expand access to resilient power technologies for the benefit of disadvantaged communities. So low-income communities, communities of color, and otherwise disadvantaged communities. Really started in the wake of Superstorm Sandy and the outages that hit the Northeast, but we've expanded the effort to work on projects all across the United States. We do this in a variety of different ways. We work at the state and federal level, working with policymakers to try to get the right policies, incentives, and regulatory structures in place to incentivize solar and storage, particularly for disadvantaged communities. We also do a lot of analysis and reporting. You can see several of our reports listed down here, and more of those are available at our website, resilient-power.org. We also do a number of webinars like this and put out a lot of information. And we work at the local project level as well, working with cities and states, community groups, folks at all levels of the project to try to facilitate and get more resilient power projects out there and identified. So we're not developers, but we do work as facilitators. You can see we've worked with over 150 projects across the country. It's concentrated a lot in the Northeast and the West, but increasingly we're working in other areas of the country, like the Southeast and Midwest, and we've done a lot of work in Puerto Rico. So, as I said, a lot of that information is available on our website. You can learn more about it there, or just reach out to us directly if you'd like to learn more. It's resilient-power.org. So now I'm going to turn to introducing our speakers for today. I'm very excited to have 3 representatives from the great state of New Mexico joining us today. So we have Louise Martinez, who is the Division Director for the Energy Conservation and Management Division of the state of New Mexico's Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. Ms. Martinez has over 30 years of state government experience involving program planning, development of energy management activities to assist communities in implementing of energy efficiency building upgrades and in expanding the use of renewable energy, including implementing and managing projects related to energy efficiency, alternative transportation, and renewable energy. We also have Mark Gaiser joining us, and he's Clean Energy Program Manager for the Energy Conservation and Management Division. Mark is an electrical engineer by training with a BSEE and MBA degree. He's worked for over 20 years in the aerospace industry with experience in spacecraft power systems. He's presently working for the New Mexico State Energy Office, promoting solar and wind energy sources. He's a member of the New Mexico Solar Energy Association and the American Solar Energy Society. We also have Arnie Friedt with us, and he is the Cimarron District Forester. Arnie received his bachelor's degree science in forestry from Northern Arizona University. And he joined the New Mexico State Forestry in 1994 and spent 25 years as the timber management officer for the district. As district forester, Arnie oversees multiple programs, including forest health, stewardship, timber harvest regulation, and implementation of hazardous fuel removal and defensible space projects in watersheds and wildland-urban interface areas, among other efforts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the New Mexico folks to share information about this great project.
Good morning, everyone. Of course, I say good morning because in New Mexico, it's still the morning. I want to be able to introduce to you the state of New Mexico, where we are the State Energy Office. The Energy Conservation Management Division is a division within a state agency, the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. What we do is we plan and we come up with projects that can promote new energy technologies and demonstrate them to communities so they can be replicated in other areas. We work with many organizations, including the national laboratories, the Clean Energy States Alliance. The Department of Energy is really critical to the work that we do as they support many of our projects financially as well. We are very committed to working with communities to demonstrate the use of renewable energy, new technologies that will help to bring resilience and reliability in our energy sector, and we're committed to that. We have a staff of 13 people that do this kind of work, and we're very fortunate to have very experienced people such as Mark Gaiser working with us.
Good morning, this is Mark. And Arnie, do you want to introduce yourself also?
Yes, this is Arnie Friedt. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's having a good day. The New Mexico State Forestry has statutory responsibility for wildfire suppression on all non-federal, non-municipal, non-tribal, and non-pueblo lands. The state is divided into 6 districts. Each district office works with volunteer and paid fire departments and cooperating agencies in the suppression of wildfire and protection of New Mexico citizens. Coordination of funding opportunities and programs are handled through the state office in Santa Fe. The first slide you will see is the start of the U Park fire, which started on May 31st, 2018. Prior to this, New Mexico has been in a drought situation for the last decade. We had very high winds. We hardly even had a winter. It was very dry. And of course, the fuels in the forest, the trees, the duff, the material on the ground was also dry and ready to go. Unfortunately, a fire did occur, and to this day, it's still undetermined how it started. I'm very close to this situation because I live right where you see the smoke. I was off that day, and I was woken up to a phone call. There's a fire in U Park. I looked out my door, and I saw the fire. I contacted my family. We evacuated. We said goodbye to our home because I know fire, and this was too close, and I said goodbye. By the end of the first day, there was over 3,900 acres burned. As you can see by the slide, where our district office is, and my home is very close to this. As you can see by the many numbers on the side of the screen, that we had many people helping us. And by the end of this fire, our maximum number of personnel helping was over 600. With all this going on, fire engines, bulldozers, tenders, helicopters, all the above, you need communication. And unfortunately, the fire did knock out all our power, our internet, and our phone lines. Fortunately, we did have a generator on site that helped us. Prior to the 2010 fire of the Horseshoe Fire, we did not have any backup. We finally got backup with the generator. The generator helped us out, but still, we had a lot of resources to manage, and we had safety issues, we had weather issues, we had evacuation issues, and without a reliable source of power, we pretty much had to fold up and move out of this place to a safer place. As I said earlier, the Ute Park fire, the cause of it is undetermined. In the end, the fire turned out to be over 36,000 acres. If you could imagine 1,000 acres an hour. A very unfortunate situation, and affecting many, many people. And if anybody out there is familiar with the Philmont Scout Ranch, the majority of this fire is on that ranch. The ranch covers many more acres, but a third of the ranch was compromised, and now the ranch needs to find places for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to go elsewhere. So very unfortunate situation. So with the help of the folks that helped us put this program together, we are more resilient. We have a reliable source of energy, power, reliable internet service, reliable phones, cell phones. This was to me, it was a godsend, because without communications, we compromised the safety and effectiveness of fighting a wildland forest fire. The last slide is a photo outside my front door of my office. You can see the smoke. If it wasn't for the efforts of all personnel on this fire, and especially the 747 that flew overhead and directed this fire away from our office, we probably wouldn't be talking from this office right now. So many, many people, I'm thankful for them, and I still have my house. We still live there, and I hope to live there for many, many more years. Thank you for your time.
Okay, this is Louise again, and we'll talk about how this project came about. In our office, we were very fortunate that the State Energy Program, funded through the Department of Energy, came up with additional funding for all state energy offices throughout the country. And we have to find ways to use this funding that we had a year to use. And having listened to Arnie earlier, you think about the devastation that wildfires bring. While we don't have hurricanes, we have wildfires. And, the State Energy Program NASIO meeting that was held, they talked a lot about emergency response and the importance of resiliency. So we started discussing, okay, how can we help our forestry office? They are our sister division. And we started thinking about, they really do need to reduce their computer failures, and how are they going to replace them with the funding that's available, and also that they had poor quality services. And we were talking, and we thought about, okay, how can this actually take place? How can we improve the resiliency in the State Forestry Office, since they are required to respond to fires and have good communications. We knew that the need for it was really urgent, especially since New Mexico suffers from such severe droughts. So Jeremy Lewis and I had a discussion, and Jeremy Lewis said, well, you know, we really do need to find out what it is that they need. So how can we find someone to help us do that and still have a way of being able to help our forestry division? So Jeremy Lewis, who was our bureau chief for our division, he's no longer with our division, but he was really instrumental in getting to Seth Mullendore of the Clean Energy Group and working with Sandia National Laboratories as well to talk about the potential to do an analysis of the need of the State Forestry Office. And based on that study, and without that study, we would not have been able to do this project. So what we did is we talked to the Forestry Division after we got our study and asked them if they would be interested in partnering with us, to collaborate with us, because this was going to benefit the security of their computers and ensuring that they had a really reliable energy source in case of an emergency. And they came forward and also helped to fund part of this project. It was really important that the Forestry Division and our division work together as a sister agencies to make this work, because, you know, there's nothing like being able to demonstrate and to lead by example, because by doing this, others will follow because they see the importance of resiliency, they see the importance of this new technology, and we're hoping that our forestry office will be one of those showcase projects that will be able to show the rest of New Mexico what can be done in times of crisis.
This is Mark Gaiser. We're going to transition to the next slide. One thing that we didn't highlight is that the last paragraph on the slide says the project had to be done by June 30th. That was a requirement of the funding that we had available. So we already have a timeline. We didn't know how we were going to perform the project, but we need to go forward.
Hi, Mark. Just make sure you click the slide before you start using the arrows, and it should be good to go.
Yes, I'm trying. There we go. Okay, this is an aerial view, courtesy Google, although it is names on it to identify the various parts of the forestry office. Basically, there's an old office and a new office, the two office buildings. There's two shop buildings. There were on-site living quarters at the time of this image. There's a helipad there to when the helipad has to pick up people or drop off people. It's at the end of the Kit Carson Electric Co-op 15 kV radial line. That line is about 55 miles long. It goes over 2 mountain passes and winds its way through the forest. So it has had a history of being very unreliable feeding this office, and that was part of the reason why the equipment was failing. It is located on US 64, east of Ute Park on the map, and it's also east of the entrance to the Philmont Scout Ranch. The site is basically propane powered and with electricity. It has a well house, does feed water, and just a nice little site. So the project took form basically here in September. There was about 9 months to completion. September was devoted to looking at the goals and operational scenarios. How are we going to provide the best backup system for the forestry office. The second block, we're documenting all the various pieces of equipment, the consumption, site layout, and existing equipment. That was a very critical piece of this. We tried to do a very in-depth document discovery and documents for the site, plus also taking over 400 photos of the various pieces of equipment and having them available to inform the Clean Energy Group's contractor, American Microgrid Solutions, AMS. We're at the end of September, we were able to pass all the significant information on to AMS so they can start the analysis of the site. We're 8 months to completion now, starting in October. AMS has their draft available. In November, they updated the draft with the New Mexico State pricing agreement information about the solar components, the storage, and then they were able to provide a copy of that final back to us for at the end of November, and we distributed to various groups that were participating to review it in December of 2018. AMS did a very fine job of working through all the various discussions we had and all the various notes, and sometimes it was very mixed information that we were sending them. But basically, they came down with this matrix, looking at normal mode, the daily use of it, and the outage mode where we potentially lose power. Looked at the operational characteristics and also the financial requirements that we placed upon them. And we talked about, you know, that most of the time, 99.9% of the time, we'd be connected to the grid, and there'd probably be no critical issues with the system. The main problem was that we, at that 10th of a percent of the time when there was no grid connection and the fire in the neighborhood, that it needed to be available. And going through our power objectives is that we want to make sure that the power for the site was good quality, that it wouldn't damage any more of the computers, plotters, printers, and other equipment, radio equipment that was used at the forestry office. We need to make sure that it was reliable. If it transitioned over, we want to make sure that there was, it would do it. It would transition over and it would be there, and it wouldn't require any particular personnel actions to do this, to do the transition, and it would be available. Resilience, uninterrupted load for the computers, and we had to try to do this for less than $100,000 a year, or for the installation cost. Fuel supply, the site runs on propane. It has used a propane-powered generator, but we were going to filter the generator output through the inverter system to clean up the power out of the generator. That was a requirement to improve the power quality. One of the things that we insisted on the front end was that operational ease. We wanted to make sure that the operators at the site wouldn't have to be out there flipping switches or trying to figure out. And we wanted to be able to remote site monitor it so that if they needed help, that we could see it, the operation from our remote sites. And so that was our objectives. AMS also analyzed the various cases, the base case where it's running on utility generator power, or you can run it on utility solar and generator power, and then into the resilient power modes where it's operating off-grid or unconnected from the grid and providing quality power. They also looked at a full double conversion UPS system. That was one of our parties here was pushing for double conversion, and so AMS looked at that, and of course power quality correction. Coming out of all the analysis that AMS did, and their document is a very well done document. Microgrid analytics provided a lot of the data analysis. It came down to that we looked at option 2. It best matched our financing that was available and best matched our operational goals. One of the things that really played into this is our critical items list. We had developed a critical items list for every building, every piece of equipment on site, and had bounced that back with the foresters, and the operators, and the IT department about, what pieces are absolutely critical, what pieces are somewhat critical, and what pieces can we load shed if we needed to. And so that was a fairly good discussion between the various parties there as we went forward. AMS then, had created this menu of options, and basically we selected Resilient Power 2 as where we were trying to go towards, and it had a cost about $71,000. That was priced from our state pricing agreement, and this is the various items. Talking about a 9.7 kW array, we actually ended up with the sizing to be on site about 10.3 kW. The battery sizing, generator sizing, the existing generator is a 20 kW propane. It still has a few more years of life out of it, so we kept that. We do have resilience with the generator, at least 72 hours. Just solar and storage only. We've had a demonstrated period of, I think, 14 hours once so far. That was an oops, but it does provide good backup. Coming out of December with this report into January, we had to jump through a few other hoops, talking with Kit Carson Electric about adding the system. We had to talk to the State Historical Preservation agent about any antiquities or other items that we might interrupt in the process of this. We required a letter from that office. We did select off of the state price agreement vendor. Paradise Power is located in Taos, and just because they're close to this site, they were selected. We do have other vendors that have just equal capabilities in the state, but Paradise Power was the closest, so it minimized the travel costs for this contract. And we did issue the contract in early March of 2019. And of course, March is now only 3 months from the system having to be installed and operational. In terms of installation photos, I just put together a few. The original, we had specified a ground mount unit. In discussions with the vendor and reviewing the rooftop structures, we determined that the rooftop mounting was an excellent location for this. So we used the rooftop mounts. There's various wiring challenges with using the existing rooftops, but all the wiring comes down to the inverter and controls in that shop number 2, and then the battery bank is located there also. And the two offices, there's this photo that the two offices have critical loads panels. The one that we show is on the old office, but there's a similar panel on the new office where all the critical loads, all the computer outlets, all the radio outlets, all the lighting, all comes to those critical load panels, so that that's where the inverter and the battery system directs their power. Some statistics: the contract price was $79,200. Early on in the trenching, the trenching cut an internet cable and a phone line between the new office and the old office. It was an unmarked cable conduit system. It wasn't identified under the present National Electric Code requirements for identifying of cables that are buried. This was a major issue for Arnie since we didn't get this actually repaired until the end of the project. Arnie, do you want to comment on that?
Yes. The cutting of the line was, the line went to our older office, which is occupied by a contractor that uses it. And, you know, these things happen. It wasn't known to the current folks that work here. And it was found by a ditch witch. And unfortunately, it took some time to repair. The contractor moved over to the main office during that time, and it was repaired. I believe it was a couple months before it was repaired. It had to do with, you know, who was going to pay for it, where the money comes from. So it eventually got repaired, and we're up and running now.
So that's some of those unknowns, and that was a pretty expensive unknown to cut that line. But again, it's hard to, we couldn't find it on our as-built drawings or any of our information that we had available. The line wasn't properly identified. You know, you're supposed to bury a caution tape with it. And on most of the projects I've done, construction, seems like running through an internet line or a phone line has been one of those most common things to happen, although, you know, it does drive up the cost. Time from concept to completion, basically 11 months. Probably some people can do it faster, but working through the state, working through all the hurdles we had to do, it actually was a pretty reasonable completion time. And on-site construction time, the contractor's on-site for about 12 weeks. Production to date, this is just showing the production. The system was connected about mid-June, started producing energy, and it's been running well ever since. Typically, it's backfeeding the grid about 2 kW, loads 1 to 2 kW, and the battery bank is kept charged. We have been in discussions a little bit with Kit Carson Electric Co-op. They're wanting to potentially install some control over the storage so that they could maybe obtain some benefit from the storage system. We're already providing some benefit to the system because we are on the end of that 15 kV line, and when we're back feeding the grid, even if it's a few kW, we are helping the power and the voltage levels on that line out there, just a volt or two, but still it's helping them a little bit on the end of that long radial line. And Arnie, as we go forward here, can you describe what it's like having the solar system on site?
Yes, Mark. Thank you. I would like to say that the installation from the contractor was very seamless and very minor inconvenience. Most of the work is done outside the office in different buildings, so the main office wasn't in any way inconvenienced. So that went well. Like we spoke earlier, we had the major inconvenience of the damaged internet and phone lines, but got that corrected. We had I think Mark called it a whoops earlier. The whoops was when the Kit Carson Electric came out to change the meters out so we could sell the energy back to them. They turned off the main power, switched the meters, and failed to put the main power back on and left. We did not know that. We went into crisis mode. The generator came on after the batteries used all their energy, and we just didn't know what was going on. It took a day and a half to figure it out. And once we turned the main switch back on, everything was fine. So just the lack of communication from Kit Carson Electric. Other than that, it's definitely, it lives up to its name, a resilient project, and we're setting good. We're setting really good. I would have to say, though, there's one item that we haven't corrected yet, and I hope a fix is coming soon. What happens is when the power goes out, so we're at the end of the line, when the power goes out, our internet also goes out. Well, when the power comes back on, everything comes back on, everything gets back to normal, except for the internet connection. So we manually have to go to the system, which is in one of the outbuildings, and unplug the internet connection and then plug it back in. So it has to be done manually. So that's the only thing that we haven't figured it out yet, and it's a manual reset, and I hope at some point in the near future we could correct that issue. Thank you.
I understand that potentially is a software change at the interconnect box on the inverter. So I don't know. I know Paradise Power reported to the vendor. I don't know whether we'll get any resolution here in the near term, but it's been noted as being an issue. And one last photo here. This is from the road, and I got some lightning bolts there pointing out the solar panels. The panels were mounted flush and flat with the roof, and that does reduce some of the solar energy gain in the winter. But one of the requirements that we specified early on up front was that we want to make less of a target for the PV for bullet strikes. So having them flush or flat with the roof, as you can see from the road here, the PV panels are fairly invisible, and we believe that will make them endure longer for those random bullet strikes that PV panels get in New Mexico. And I just advertising, we are working on another Solar+Storage project called the Hyde State Park Microgrid 2020. We're in the process of going through the description of that project at the moment. And from our office, I would like to thank Seth Mullendore, the Clean Energy Group, Jeff Oxnam of American Microgrid Solutions, Travis Simpkins of Microgrid, Julie Howe of the U.S. Department of Energy State Energy Program. She was also very supportive of this program. Daniel Weinman, Marty McDonald, and Andy O'Reilly of Paradise Power Company. They were truly supportive. They worked really hard to make sure that we met our June 30th deadline date. I'd like to thank Louis Reyes, CEO of Kit Carson Electric Co-op. He was very supportive of this. And for those who I didn't mention, thank you all. It took a whole army of people to make this project successful in the time frame given. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you very much, Louise, Mark, and Arnie. That was a really great presentation. Again, exciting project. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know before. I'm assuming this random bullet strikes are completely accidental and have nothing to do with the solar panels themselves. But something that the design for New Mexico should figure out bullet protection for those solar panels. I also had to look up and see what a ditch witch was because I was not familiar with that. All right. So for those of you that joined later on, we are recording the webinar. We'll send around a recording probably within the next day or two, and we'll also have the slides attached to that, so you'll have access to the slides from today as well. So let's transition into some question and answer. We got a good amount of time, so right now it looks like we might get to most of the questions that were posed. One thing that I'm curious, question came in, I'm curious if you guys have an answer to, was there any analysis of the cost of the energy from the system versus, say, that you're getting from the utility? Was there a per kilowatt hour cost analysis that was done at any point to see what the relative costs were there? Great.
Yes, the relative costs were there. Again, at this price point, it wasn't a break even in the near term, but the thing that drove the project was adding the resiliency, because without having the system up, easily you could say an hour's worth of downtime, you could lose a whole house because you couldn't get the crews to a house or a structure in time. So we balanced, tried to look at the cost of the energy, but we also looked at the cost of the resiliency. And this trade-off was we went back and forth, and the $79,000 was a good trade-off, but it will not pay off if you're just going for avoiding the energy cost.
Okay, thanks for that. I have a question about the damage that you mentioned to equipment and the improving the output flow. I think you said during the presentation, Mark, that the output from the generator now flows through the inverter to improve power quality. Is that correct?
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about the problems that you were having and the equipment issues prior to that?
What they were having is that with just the generator there tied in, there was an automatic transfer switch. But if there was a brownout, the transfer switch wouldn't kick in. So sometimes they'd have low voltages in the 9500 volt range. The IT department thought that a few of those events had destroyed a couple of power supplies on their computers. The most serious one was if the power went away, there was the 30-second, 40-second off, and then the generator would be cranking back up. And between the transient of the power going away and then the transient of the generator coming back on, there's some significant voltage spikes that would occur. And IT also believed that that was also an issue. And typically the computers would fail whenever they had a multiple day where they went to generator power and back several times in a day. The next day they would not have computers. One of the initial thoughts was to add an UPS. There was a much bigger UPS installed to filter, mainly filter the power to the computers. That was there, but the problem with the UPS is that if the power is out for more than 10 minutes, you have to start the backup generator, and it wasn't automatic at that point. So adding the resiliency helped. But the main problem was that power quality was horrible. Great, thanks for telling more about that. And for those of you that don't know, the UPS or UPS, it's an uninterruptible power supply. The question came in, can you speak a little bit more about the decision to shift from ground mount system to rooftop, and really what the factors were that made you decide to shift the focus there to a roof mounted system? That was a kind of a cost trade-off. Originally, we were thinking about mounting the PV panels on the ground closer to the input area on site. We thought that would do the least amount of trenching and ground disturbance. But after discussing with our state historical preservation that they didn't feel like there was a real issue with disturbing the ground inside the area. It was an option then to go to the roof mounts. And then so talking to the vendor said, we can do this a little bit less expensively if we use the roof, if the roof will support the load with the snow load. So we had to actually have PEs come out and check the roof loading for both of those shops. Once they approved the fact that we could install solar panels on the roofs, then it became very easy to say the roofs are a much cheaper option to install the panels on. There was some concern, though. The east shop had some significant shading by the tree there. We're limited that we couldn't cut trees down or cut off limbs severely, so we had to work around some shading from that tree on the east shop.
And is snow a big factor, especially considering that the panels are laid pretty flat? If you have if snow removal from the panels was a factor that was accounted for at all?
We discussed it. The site is 6,500 feet up in elevation. It can get a couple of feet of snow in one storm. I understand Arnie might be able to talk better about that, but since the winter isn't usually the fire season, we thought that it was less of an issue. And again, we also had the PEs checked for snow loading on those structures.
So a question on the generator side. Just I think it said in the slides that it's a 500-gallon propane tank. Is that correct? And do you have a sense of how long that would last during an outage situation? There was a question. There was the kind of 72-hour mandate. Do you know how long the propane generator on its own would be able to back up the site?
It runs about 3 gallons an hour. If you had about 300 gallons in a tank, you would get about 100 hours. Yeah.
Yep, great. So I noticed on the slide looking at the output from the PV and the battery, it looked like actually the battery had more of an output than the PV. I'm assuming that's because is the battery sometimes charging from the grid?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Also, the connection for how the system was set up, if is it DC connected where the PV goes directly through the storage?
Yes, that's how it's connected. They go through the charge controllers into the battery, and the inverter also has a charger that can either run off the generator power or the grid.
Yep. Great. So there's a question about the types of batteries, what the battery, I guess the chemistry and the make, as well as the controller, and whether or not it was a single manufacturer that provided the system components, or if it was multiple vendors.
Paradise Power did some value engineering. The batteries are sealed lead acid. Paradise Power had the most experience. They've been doing off-grid systems and towers for the last 40 years. I might get that wrong, but their experiences with these sealed lead acid batteries, that they thought it was the best value for the operation that we envision here at the grid tie. The fact that the batteries state of charge are kept at close to 100% most of the time means that it should last a long time in this service. And like I said, Paradise Power put the system together with various vendors.
Yeah, great. This is an interesting question that I wonder if was factored in. This question just about when there is a fire nearby, like for the one you showed, was it factored into the PV would be shaded out by smoke from a fire, and if that would be a significant impact on determining how the system would operate in an outage?
We did talk to American Microgrid Systems to consider that. Smoke may be an issue, although I don't have any data that I ran about how dense the smoke and stuff. But if it's just light smoke, you'll probably still pick up probably 80% of your energy off the panels. It's only if it's really dense, and that means it's really close. So that's an issue. But yeah, we did consider smoke-induced reduction in PV output.
Great, thanks. A question about the cost effectiveness, the fact that you said that it was not cost effective just based on energy, but that considering the resilience value that it was justified. Was there any actual developing a value of resilience, whether dollars per hour of outage, to justify the economic viability? But was it more just were there actual number values attached to that, or any sort of calculation that you used to determine that, or was it more of a general, we know this is worth the value?
Well, we did have the value of the computer systems. If we, improve the power quality, that helped the computer systems cost. We're not buying a new set of computers every year, so that was one of the costs. The other value, I did some early estimates of, if you were out for, if you're out for an hour or 2 or 3 hours, and you lost, communications, what was that worth? There was a real exclamation point on that sort of thought in November when you had the fire in California there, where the loss of communications. The one fire manager was trying to run his fire crews using a Verizon connection, and the Verizon connection went down because they didn't have the plan updated. That loss in California was thought that they lost at least 30 people died, and several houses, quite a few houses burned because of that 12 hours or so where they didn't have communication. So that was the exclamation point in November last year. So you always look, if you look back at something, you say, why didn't we install a little bit more back then, or why didn't we go a little bit farther? Because if we had it, we could have prevented something. That's always hard to do, to justify going forward. How much capacity do we need? That was one of the reasons why we had an IT gentleman pushing for full double conversion. The problem with full double conversion, it costs a lot, and then the potential for it to be the single point of failure kind of drove it back to let's have a multiple generation system that a little bit more reliability in my estimation, and it costs a little less, but well worth the extra cost over just trying to keep the generator and the ups running. So
yeah,
no, I guess what I'm saying is there was no specific spreadsheet looking at that, no hard numbers brought forward.
Yep, got it. So you mentioned the California wildfires, and I know that there's been a lot of news lately about utilities in California and a few other Western utilities talking about de-energizing transmission lines, distribution lines, because of fire conditions and the potential of sparking fires from their infrastructure. Is that something that's been of concern where the fire office operates in New Mexico? Is this something that Kit Carson has talked about at all?
Kit Carson, I don't know whether Kit Carson or whether it's a tri-state generation transmission. Arnie might be able to answer it, but there was a fire started by a sagging transmission line in New Mexico, and I think it was 3 years ago. It was a line that fed Taos, and they're still, I think Kit Carson is still paying some of that price in their monthly payments.
Yeah, Arnie, do you have any more information on that? Do you know if that's been a significant concern for fire operations there?
Well, we definitely have issues with power lines starting fires in grass and forest and whatnot. So it is of issue and of concern. I don't have any other information to add.
Okay, thanks. Another question on Kit Carson. You mentioned there at the end that they had been talking to you about potentially tapping into the battery for benefit for the grid. Can you talk a little bit more about what their potential plans might be, if you know, and are they considering some sort of confiscation scheme for being able to control the batteries at some point?
Basically this summer, Kit Carson had received back from the National Renewable Energy Labs a full model of their distribution grid. Now, it didn't include just the grid, but it included every inverter, every meter, every solar system on the grid, and they're mapping it with storage in mind. In order to get to their 100% solar energy power by at the end of 2021, 2022, they need to be able to use the storage that's on site, and they're discussing about adding bigger storage to their distribution grid. But they also want to talk to us about, how do we feel about some sort of compensation scheme where they have some control over our storage in order to improve their operation of that long line. So, I haven't had that discussion yet. It's just a preliminary. In passing, we've discussed it, but yes, compensation for it would be of interest, or how we do it go forward. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The whole exercise that Kit Carson is going through. Do you know if there's going to be any sort of, or if there's already some sort of public-facing analysis, or if there's going to be anything public that they put out on the study that NREL did?
I think the NREL study is public-facing. I don't know whether it's available from Kit Carson. It might be available from NREL or maybe Rocky Mountain Institute.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So we pretty well got to most of the questions. We only got a couple of minutes left here, so I think we're going to wrap it up. And say thank you again to Mark and Arnie and Louise. Really appreciate all the information here. For folks that do have additional questions, please reach out to either Clean Energy Group or the folks at the Energy Division in New Mexico, and I'm sure everybody would be happy to answer your questions. I'd like to turn things back over to Mari now to have a little bit of information about some upcoming webinars that we have lined up for you in the coming months.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar. We do have an upcoming webinar. We have one on Tuesday, October 1st from 3 to 4 p.m. about the FERC 841 compliance update. And then we have another one on Thursday, October 10th from 1 to 2 p.m. on replacing power plants with low-income residential solar and storage. So we hope that you tune in for those, and you can register at cleanegroup.org/webinars. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to our panelists.